this is really the final point, and it's one of the key points. Right now, this is as hard as it's ever going to be. There's so many people who are working on solutions towards making it easier to really be able to safely feel secure about the value that you're storing in Bitcoin. Because right now, I mean, like it's kind of terrifying. You know, if you just have your Bitcoins on your computer, especially as the value is going up, it's like, wow, you know, I mean, am I safe? You know, what can I do to better protect myself? Stephanie, what are you doing with your Bitcoin these days?
Well, I actually, as the price has gone up, I've become more and more paranoid about Bitcoin storage. I just want to preface this by saying there's a funny article out there. It's a satirical piece, and they claim to be a computer security expert, and it's titled "The Only Truly Secure Way to Store Your Bitcoins." And he proceeds to list a list of steps that you can take to spend or to have Bitcoins completely securely. And it starts with fabricating your own computer chips out of sand and compiling the Bitcoin client yourself out of your own code, manually checking each line of digging a 6-foot hole in the ground, surrounding the edges with concrete, and then burying your computer and yourself in that hole. And obviously it's a satirical piece, but that's kind of how it can get. I mean, and it's funny because it's kind of true, right? There are a lot of ways that your security could potentially be compromised when using Bitcoin. Don't let that scare you away from using coins. Just, you know, take some reasonable precautions. Those precautions would be anytime your private keys or your passwords are on a computer that's connected to the internet, there's maybe some risk of malware that could log your passwords or log your keystrokes or whatever. If your Bitcoins are stored on a web wallet, so-called, which is an online wallet, like something like blockchain.info or the infamous former service that doesn't exist anymore, InstaWallet, or wasn't there another one like mybitcoin.com or something like that?
The core takeaway for me about the web wallets, okay, so there are 3 descriptors, right? They're secure web wallet. You can have 2 of these, but not 3. And at its core, that's the problem, is that Bitcoin is like, because it's such good money, when you store it online and you have a bunch of people all storing Bitcoin in the same place, it's like a giant piñata, right? Whereas the price of Bitcoin goes up, or the more popular the service gets, the bigger the prize is for breaking it open and getting inside. And so that's what we see happen, is that as these services get large, and especially as the price goes up, the incentives for hacking into them and stealing the Bitcoin that are inside just go through the roof. It's very, very difficult to run these services in a way where they're invulnerable to that. And we've even seen services that were specifically saying they were specializing in security and doing everything right, they still get compromised. So just in general, save yourself the headache. Don't store your coins in online wallets. Store your coins somewhere that you have control over and ownership of.
I would add a little change to that, which would be, you know, there can be usefulness to online wallets or web wallets, but really not for more than so-called pocket change amounts of Bitcoins. Like, don't store all your Bitcoins in a blockchain.info wallet, please, unless you have 0.01 Bitcoins or something like that, and you're not that worried about it if you lose it. But there can be a real convenience to web wallets. That's the thing. Like, if you have a blockchain.info account, you can get an email whenever you receive Bitcoins to that address or something like that. Or same thing with Coinbase. They have kind of a web wallet service. So these things can be really convenient, and you can take some steps to secure them, like 2-factor authentication.
But they're a target.
Really,
I mean, it's just that they're
totally
a target.
Are.
It's a target. And so there are lots of software solutions that allow you to run Bitcoin on your computer. You can get physical Bitcoins if you don't even want to deal with running the software, although they do come at a premium.
Yeah, that's a very expensive way to get into Bitcoin. You can actually accomplish the same thing. A physical Bitcoin, or a physical representation of Bitcoin, is basically a Bitcoin wallet and a private key that exists on paper or on a little token that's called a casacious coin, or some other way in the physical world that's not digital. You know, it's physical. And through this, you can actually import the private key into a computer-based wallet, and you can move the Bitcoins from there. Or you could just give someone a physical Bitcoin, right? Like, you can transfer them that way, but you just can't break it up.
Right. Physical Bitcoins, they're not really like tokens, because really what it is they need to be redeemed, right? They're like redeemable Bitcoins. What I mean when I say redeemable, if I were to hand you a physical Bitcoin right now, we wouldn't actually be making a transaction on the Bitcoin network. Instead, what we would be doing is I would be giving you a wallet that is known to contain, let's say, 1 Bitcoin. You could then trade that to someone else for 1 Bitcoin worth of something. But at some point in that chain, if someone wants to use the Bitcoins online, then that physical Bitcoin does need to be redeemed, which involves peeling off the sticker and recovering the private key, which then lets you have control of the wallet. But as long as it's not redeemed, whoever holds the coin controls the wallet, even though they can't access it yet. If they choose to redeem it, they can access it. And at that point, the coin stops being valuable because you can't prove that the money is there and you haven't already spent it or don't have the ability to spend it.
So yeah, getting back to storing your Bitcoins. So there are different levels of security. The least secure would be an online or web wallet, also probably one of the most convenient. Another slightly more secure way would be to store the Bitcoins on a desktop client on your computer. So there's a couple of those. There's the original Bitcoin client called Bitcoin QT, or sometimes called the Satoshi client. This used to be the only program that you could download to your desktop for storing Bitcoins. The problem is it also downloads a copy of the entire blockchain to your computer, which is now something like 12 gigabytes or more. It takes up a lot of space on your computer, and it takes a long time to synchronize and download that whole blockchain. So people, for that reason, maybe tend to shy away from that client a little bit more, although some people do still use it. You can come up with a passphrase and encrypt your wallet on that. So as long as your passphrase isn't maybe stored on your computer or written down where people could gain physical access to it, and that's pretty secure, I would say.
Yeah, let's talk about encrypting your password real quick, because this is a commonality among all the wallets that you're going to do. Most of them will start not encrypted, right? And so what that means is if I have on my computer an unencrypted Bitcoin wallet and I, launch that program, then I can send Bitcoin and receive Bitcoin without having to type in a password, which also means that if somebody else either sits down on my computer and opens that software or accesses it remotely by hacking into my computer, which apparently is something that still happens. I just saw somebody else had it happen to them a couple days ago, then they essentially, all they have to do is just access my computer, and then they have just as much ability to send any of my Bitcoins as I do. But if you encrypt it, essentially what you're doing is you're taking your private key, which is that thing that lets you behind the scenes spend your Bitcoin by assigning them to someone else, and it encrypts it with this password basically. So in order for you to decrypt and then spend your Bitcoin, you need to enter this password first. So instead, if someone sits down to your computer or hacks into your computer, then they need to enter that password too. So because of this, it's very, very important that you encrypt your wallet, because it means that there's that additional barrier to entry where unless you've let out your password somewhere else or your computer is really infected with something that's logging your keystrokes, which is pretty bad, I mean, as far as infections are concerned, then you probably will be safe. Even if someone has access to your computer, they still can't necessarily spend your Bitcoin unless they crack your password.
So some examples of that would be the Bitcoin QT client, or AKA the Satoshi client. There's also a couple of other programs that I think are worth mentioning, and those are Multibit, Electrum, and Armory. So Electrum and Multibit, as I understand it, are, desktop-based clients. You can do the encryption and everything. You can encrypt your private keys on your computer, and your password never goes to any server or anything like that, as I understand it with those programs. So it's not as though your password is being uploaded somewhere where somebody could potentially hack it and get your password, steal your Bitcoins. But what they do is access a copy of the blockchain that is stored on a public server. It's kind of the best of both worlds. You got the encryption going on your computer, but you are accessing the blockchain somewhere else so that you don't have to host the entire blockchain on your machine. So it's faster. It's faster setup. If you download one of these, what you do is connect to a server and you can start sending and receiving Bitcoins right away. They also have some other cool features, where you can store a bunch of different addresses within the same wallet. All of these desktop clients allow you to do that. And usually with a web wallet, it's one address. Sometimes they have a couple of addresses in there, but some web wallets are only one address, or it's a pain to figure out how to get multiple addresses in them. So we got Electrum, Multibit, and Armory is one that I know you use. Adam, personally, I use a couple different clients. I do have a blockchain.info account that I barely use for anything. I also have Electrum, Armory, and the Bitcoin QT client. Haven't really used Multibit. What else? I also use an Android wallet called Mycelium. That's one for your phone. There's also blockchain.info apps for Android and iPhone. And also there's some other ones that may not be available yet, but they're coming soon for for iOS devices. And I also have physical Casacious coins and paper wallets. So I use everything. And I think security through distributing Bitcoins into different wallets and different methods of storage is a good idea as well.
I don't have any bases with Multibit. That's not one that I've used, but Electrum is one that I've used. And I think that you're right. It offers advantages from both worlds as far as, you get the security of a desktop client with the convenience of not having to manage the blockchain yourself. It's important to note that with Bitcoin wallets, there really is no such thing as a free lunch, and whatever you get, you also are giving somewhere else. So essentially, the downside to an Electrum wallet system is that because you're not maintaining the blockchain yourself, because you're not maintaining that ledger yourself, and instead you're relying on a third party, if that third party ledger is compromised, then you and everyone else who's relying on it could potentially be getting bad data. It's this push and pull between convenience and security. And you can't have 100% convenience and 100% security, at least yet. We're still waiting on things that might make it easier to do that. But there is always a downside. Armory also has downsides. Armory is my hands down favorite wallet. I think I have 8 wallets all using Armory, and that's compared to 4 or 5 with all of the other clients that I use combined. And that's, again, because I like to have a different wallet for each project that I'm working on at the time so that the funds can be separated. It's very easy and clean. Armory is great because it's really all about making sure that you're not going to lose your Bitcoins. And so they have great backup features in it. And Alan Reiner, the lead developer on it, has been pioneering some really innovative and very new to Bitcoin features into that client as well. The good part about it is that it's really focused on security. It's easy to use once you kind of get the hang of how things work, and it's pretty self-explanatory. They've done a good job with the interface. The bad part about it
even has a feature where you can somehow store Bitcoin in offline wallets. What is that?
So when you create a wallet, you get the option of how you want to back it up. And what they encourage you to do is essentially to print a paper backup, where at any point in the future, if you take this paper backup and you type in, I think it's like a 32-digit long code split into groups of 4, then you can recover your wallet without knowing the password, without doing any of this stuff. So it's like a fail safe, right? So if I die and my wife doesn't know my password, but we've got one of these in the safety deposit box, she can get that out and recover it, even if for whatever reason she doesn't know my password or any of my information about it. Armory lets you do that, and they're also working on features because the concern there, of course, is that, okay, well, what if somebody who I don't want to gets hold of this paper, then they have access to my Bitcoin and they're not protected by encryption or anything like that. So what Armory has done to address this is they've created multi-part or fragmented backups, where instead of printing one piece of paper, you print like 3 pieces of paper or 5 pieces of paper. And each paper is different, and in order to get the combination, in order to recover the wallet, you need to have, say, 2 of 3 or 3 of 5, something like that. So you can have a little bit more security. So again, you can tell that even in that case, it's less convenient, but it's probably more secure. So Armory, as far as, this security versus convenience side, is definitely on the security side, but it's getting much easier to use. Right now, if you try to install it, this is the middle of November, so this won't be the case for more than another couple of weeks. It uses quite a lot of RAM. I have 16 gigabytes of RAM on my computer, and it uses a lot. Uses a lot of RAM because of the way that it was originally built. But I'm testing a version right now that should be out in the next couple of weeks that uses maybe 300 megabytes of RAM and is so much faster and offers all of the same security features. So these problems are being solved over time. It's just an issue of what was done first.
All of these issues, developers have a great incentive to help solve these problems for people, to help make Bitcoin easier to use and more user-friendly. And it's just going to get easier from here on out, like you said.
Right now is the most difficult it will ever be, and it's going to get easier from here. And eventually, I mean, like Stephanie, I can see a future where I don't even know I'm using Bitcoin. A lot of times I'm using Bitcoin. It's just something that's kind of running in the background, empowering my transactions. Eventually that's going to happen. I hope I can always spend Bitcoin because I really like the feeling of these direct person-to-person payments in an internet-connected system. But at the same time, it sure would be nice if I didn't have to think about it quite so much sometimes.
One thing maybe we ought to mention with Bitcoin storage is the concept of creating paper wallets.
All a paper wallet is, you could take a piece of paper, right? Just a plain piece of printer paper, whatever, and just write down your private code on it. And that would functionally be a paper wallet. Because really, that's all you need to do. And then so the reason why paper wallets are desirable is because if you have this number on paper, then you can, if you want to, remove that number from your computer. And if that number isn't on your computer, then it's not an issue of whether or not you've encrypted your wallet or not, because if someone does compromise your computer, the numbers simply aren't there for them to take because you've taken them offline.
Right. Then if somebody compromises your house or somebody compromises your physical wallet, then they might gain access to it. So it's just a different set of problems. But that's probably, I would say, would you say it's the gold standard now for Bitcoin secure storage to generate key pairs with an address and a private key offline with a computer that's never touched the internet, that's known to not be compromised, then print them off and, dig a hole, bury them, something like that, or somehow physically secure them so that malicious people cannot gain access to them. I think that's probably the most paranoid you can get. But then again, paranoia is only paranoia if you're wrong, right? People have had that Bitcoin stolen from their computers. So
no, this is very true. Yeah, absolutely. But I mean, the thing to keep in mind is that with Bitcoin, you get to figure out what your risk tolerance is. You get to figure out how much convenience you want versus not, and just treat it based on what your particular needs are. And really, that's the key, is that Bitcoin lets you do whatever the heck it is that you want. If you want to use it, I mean, whatever you want to use it for, however you want to use it, even if you're breaking the rules. I mean, this is why it has trouble with the conventional system, is because there are like limits to how much money you're supposed to be able to send, and there are people who you're not allowed to send money to. But Bitcoin really doesn't care about that, because again, it's just these rules that live in the sky, and if criminals decide to follow the rules, then the criminals get to use the system too, just like cash.
Is the Bitcoin price in a bubble? Only time will tell, but one thing's for sure. Bitcoin video passes are on sale. Normally $75 for those paying in US funds. Visit bitcoinvideopass.com and spend only 0.1 to 0.2 Bitcoins, 0.12 Bitcoins at the time this was recorded, to access all the talks and panels from the October cryptocurrency conference. See how easy buying with Bitcoin can be and experience instant access as soon as you've paid without even reloading the page. Check it out at bitcoinvideopass.com.